There is nobody in our top 25 other than Vanderbilt, because they're special, that have 2 losses. Everybody in this top 25 at this point has 0 losses or 1 loss. So, I feel like that's important to say because this is a ranking, this isn't a power rating. This isn't necessarily who we think 24 isn't necessarily beating 25 and 20 ain't necessarily beating 21 here on this list. That's not how we're looking at this. And this is not the way that I think things are going to end up. There's some teams on here that are, this is a funky looking bunch of teams here. I mean, you got your Tennessee, your Notre Dames, your teams, that you kind of figured would be in this kind of area, Kansas State, Texas A&M, right? We kind of thought in the preseason, then we kind of backed away from it. Now we're back on it. But BYU, big surprise, right? Syracuse, big surprise. SMU, Pitt, undefeated. Pitt is undefeated. I mean, we're at a point in this world where we got to talk to our children about an undefeated Pitt, okay? And sitting right there in the tall weeds in the ACC, by the way. Syracuse really as well, I guess. Illinois, not a team we talked about in the preseason. Army at 22nd. I implore you all to go look at Army and what they're doing with that offense and just with that team in general right now. Absolutely kicking people's ass. And they every bit deserve to be in here. We got Navy at number 24. This is a mosh podge of teams that nobody would have had a chance in hell at betting would be in this top 25 in week 8 of the college football season. But this is where we at. And look, I don't make the records for the teams, right? I just give you a spin on it on the internet here. Indiana kind of, I guess you could kind of say, king of the misfit toys here. They're in a big matchup this week. It's going to be one that we're going to talk about against Nebraska. Just kind of in a, in quick thoughts, I guess you could say, Mason. What do you think about 11 through 25? I didn't even really mention Tennessee kind of sliding down. They've slowly slid down the list. This was a team that we had in the top 4 for a good portion of the early part of the season, and they keep sliding down a little bit. And 11 is not a bad spot to be by any means, but it's kind of just what we had to do with the loss to obviously Arkansas. The offense hasn't looked great at this point. So each team has kind of got their little situation going on. What do you think about this group?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, when you're talking about the lower portion of the top 25, a lot of times who you keep out is more important than who you have in. No Ole Miss on this top 25, y'all. As Mark started, kind of led in with, they're a 2-loss team and they didn't make the cut. Now, do I think Ole Miss ends up in the top 25 by the end of the year? Absolutely. I
Yeah.
absolutely do. I think they had a real opportunity to beat LSU last night, and obviously the game went to overtime, but couldn't get it done. Couldn't hold on there for the win. But as of right now, when you look at Ole Miss's wins, it does not stack up against other teams' wins. Um, and I think that's the big point that we're trying to drive home here. Ole Miss has not they've lost both of their big games so far this year. Um,
Yep.
that says something, and they look like the better team in both of those games. That also says something to me. So no Ole Miss in this one. Vanderbilt does it again, stuns Kentucky this week as a 13.5 point underdog. They end up winning in convincing fashion, looked like the better team the entire game. They're definitely a team on the rise, and a team that we said last night could be undefeated right now. They kind of had a couple of bonehead weeks there, lost a couple of games that they probably shouldn't have. And now they're I mean, now's the time to buy Vandy stock if you hadn't already. So we got 2 service academy teams in there, Navy and Army. Army looks like I mean, they're 6-0 so far against the spread this year, 6-0 in general, but they're not just winning games, they're also beating the spread. They're a bit of a wagon right now. They've got Notre Dame lurking at the end of the season here, but for right now, Army looks like a really good team led by Jeff Monken, Todd Monken's brother there, and you can tell based off of the offense that he knows what he's doing there. Nebraska, they got a tough matchup this week. Um, interested to see what they're going to end up doing, this week. But so far, they've got number 16 IU this week, if you don't know. But so far, Nebraska has looked like a much better team under Matt Rule. This year, things are starting to click. Dylan Raiola is still a freshman. He's making freshman mistakes, but you can see the potential there for this team. Couple him with Isaiah Nayor, who's having a fantastic year, and a solid defense. And boy, it's gonna be a fun matchup between them and IU. I cannot wait to break that down with you, Mark. Boise State survives against Hawaii. It looked like a close game at first, and they kind of pull away late, thanks to none other than the Heisman leader, Ashton Jeanty. He is absolutely phenomenal, and he's a big reason why Boise State is as high as they are on this list. Kansas State, they're looking like possibly the best team in the Big 12. Though I think BYU will have something to say about that. Really took Colorado down to the wire, or Colorado took Kansas State down to the wire, however you want to say that. But it was a close matchup last night. They ended up winning on a big touchdown pass at the end of the game. And they've been very formidable this year. And all of a sudden, Notre Dame kind of looks like they're back into the college football playoff race here. They've not just been winning, but they've been winning convincingly. The NIU loss just looks terrible, on their resume. But the good thing is that game came so early. That loss came so early in the season. We were wondering if they would get back into the college football playoff hunt. Needed a lot of teams ahead of them to start losing, which they have. And all of a sudden, Notre Dame's kind of back in this thing. So really exciting to see that. We've got a small breakdown of them this week. They've got Georgia Tech. That is definitely going to be a test for them. But with their defense, I think that they will handle that pretty easily. And yeah, like you said, Tennessee sliding a little bit, but definitely a team at 11 that has potential to climb back into the top 10 with the playmakers that they have on offense and defense. Just kind of got caught up in a rivalry game this week and took a Florida team to overtime and ended up coming out with the W. And that's what matters, right? So interesting 11 through 25, but that's all I got for this one.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Ole Miss. Like I said, they had to drop up out of here. I mean, they've lost a third of their games this season, and they haven't beat anybody. So, it was tough for me to take Ole Miss from top 10-ish to out of the ranking. But, I mean, we're at a point in the season where if you've lost a third of your football games, you don't belong in the top 25, do you? Unless you lost both games to Georgia and Texas, or Alabama and Texas, or Oregon and Texas, or something like that, and in that case, but that's not the case here. You lose to LSU and you lose to South Carolina. I mean, to Kentucky. So this year, I'm getting Kentucky and South Carolina mixed up in my head a lot, and I don't even know why, really. All right, let's go through the top 10 here. That's what everybody wants to see. Oh, faked you out. It's 10 through 6. Number 10, we got Alabama. Look, through all the hoopla and all the, the negativity that's going on with Alabama, I mean, Alabama's still right where they want to be. Now, they had to slide down the ranking some because of their poor performance over the last couple of weeks. But look, I'm gonna tell you something. Any team that wins, and I'm not saying Alabama's winning the national championship, but I'm saying any team that goes on a journey to win a national championship is going to go through lulls, and you're going to have to have a game or two where you get lucky. And Alabama is lucky just in the fact that this year is a 12-team playoff, because if you lose to Vanderbilt in any normal year with a 14 playoff, the odds of you going to that 14 playoff are slim to none at that point. But that's not the case with Alabama. I mean, I saw where Paul Feinbaum said Alabama's definitely not a college football playoff team. Well, I don't know how you can honestly say that with a straight face whenever you sit there and look at the roster, and it's one of the most talented rosters in all the country. Now, are they undisciplined right now? Are they having issues? Yeah, it certainly seems that way from the outside looking in. But I'm not writing Alabama off. Who's writing Alabama off at this point? There's just absolutely no way. They've lost one game, and yeah, it was to Vanderbilt. But let's be honest, this is the best Vanderbilt team we've seen in 20 years at least. right? Or at least since James Franklin was there. But
Mhm.
even when James Franklin was there, he wasn't beating Alabama. He wasn't beating, he wasn't beating Kentucky even at that point. I mean, maybe he was that season. I don't know.
I mean, he did beat Georgia, so but that was a
Yeah,
2016 Georgia rebuild team, but nonetheless.
yeah. I remember it well. It was homecoming in
Yeah.
Athens, and it was Kirby's first year. Yeah, for sure. Um, let's see. Who's AGS? Chris Cobb, thank you so much for commenting. AGS 45, Mississippi State 10. Who's AGS? Am I missing something?
Uh, Ags, Texas A&M.
Oh, he's saying
Yeah.
Texas A&M Aggies. I got you. That makes sense. Um, okay, yeah, that is a game this week, and we're going to talk about that game on Tuesday. By the way, come join us on the live show. That'll be one that we do talk about a bit. Thank you, TriStar. I see that now. I understand what he was going for there now. I just don't ever refer to him as Ags. I always refer to him as A&M or ATM or whatever you want to call it. All right, LSU at number 9. Look, LSU had a huge win this week. LSU is turning a corner. They're figuring out their identity. We talked about that last night. This is the point in the season where teams start to really figure out their identity. LSU, we knew, was an offensive-led football team, but Garrett Nussmeier is a leader on this football team that's tried by fire at this point. He has been in the fire. He's been in the flames. I think this team it's really tough for a new quarterback to come in whenever you haven't started and just to be a leader all of a sudden. I don't care that he's been in the system for years, blah, 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 whatever, been at LSU for a while. Until you're out there on the field, you can't lead a football team from the sideline as a player. That's never going to happen. And especially, obviously LSU was just amazing last year, or at least their offense was. I think LSU's figuring out an identity right now. And I think their defense is taking baby steps in the right direction. They did a great job of keeping everything in front of them against Ole Miss yesterday. And that's exactly what we talked about in the preview. LSU was never going to shut down Ole Miss. This defense isn't a shutdown defense, but I think they are a bend don't break style defense. And not to mention, they were feeling themselves at the end of that football game last night. That defense was all over Jackson Dart, sacked him 6 times in that football game. That was one of the best defensive games that we've seen out of LSU in years. I don't think anybody really realized that or really thought about that, but it was something I was thinking about this morning. We have not seen LSU play that good defensively in years now. So watch out, because I'm telling you right now, LSU gets healthy on offense, they're going to be hell to deal with. They will be hell to deal with. Now, they can't run the ball that well, but they got wide receivers that are hurt right now, and then whenever they come back, it's going to be pretty crazy. Clemson at number 8, they get better, I think, throughout the season. Clemson, it feels like their team has got a little bit of momentum. It feels like the players are buying in ways that they haven't the last couple of years for Clemson. Dabo seems to be kind of doing like some old Dabo things down there. And if you watch their games right now, seems like Clemson's having a lot of fun. And that's something that I can't really say, honestly, for Georgia. I feel like Georgia's not having that much fun playing football this year. I'm just going to be honest. It doesn't seem like they're having that much fun. Go watch Clemson. It seems like they're having a ball out there. Now, Georgia has been really serious. It seems like really business-like every time they showed up at a game this year. Everybody's got their different styles, and, whatever. Clemson looks like a good team. They got a really good chance to win the ACC this season. Miami, maybe peaked too early, like that kid in high school that, was a foot taller than everybody and had a beard in 9th grade. Peaked too early, man. Now that guy looks like he's 60. Miami, I don't know. I'm interested to see what the last half of the season looks like for this team. It is really hard to ride at a really high level all season. And like I said, if you're going to win a championship, you're going to have valleys, and you've got to have leaders on the football team to be able to get you through those valleys, and you got to be able to forget about them real quick. So we'll see. We'll see with Miami, who we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Iowa State at 7. Iowa State, the hardest games on their schedule are at the end of it. So we're going to see what Iowa State's all about. But they're undefeated. This is where we're at. I mean, they haven't played that hard of a schedule, but we got to respect the fact that they're undefeated. I like Matt Campbell as a coach. Beck there at quarterback. has been really, really good. Iowa State's tough to deal with in the Big 12, and don't look now, but everybody else in the Big 12 has already been tripped up pretty much, minus BYU. So we got them at the 7th spot, and they're the highest ranked Big 12 team. Georgia at number 6. Georgia's kind of hanging in there. They're about to be tested this week. This is a different looking Georgia team than what we've seen over the last few years, guys. So, um, it's a lot different. Georgia threw the ball like 50 times this past weekend. I mean, this is just a lot different football team than what Georgia has seen over the last few years. Where does it lead by the end of the season? I'd be lying to you if I said I knew. But this Georgia team makes me a nervous wreck. I don't have near as much confidence in this Georgia team as the ones I've had in years past. And that's just kind of a fact right now. What do you think about 6 through 10? We're going to see a few of these teams play some really big games this week, and we're about to break them down a little bit, or at least give you our early thoughts. What do you think about this group?
Well, yeah, starting where you left off at 6, Georgia gets really tested against Mississippi State this past week. Georgia, probably goes into that game thinking, yeah, we'll put up some big points in the first half, and then score early in the third quarter, and then we'll get some second team in. We'll get some defenders in there to get their beak wet, and that wasn't the case. They win by 10 against Mississippi State, gave up like 30 points to Mississippi State. It's a crazy game, and Georgia just doesn't really look like you said, the team that we've seen of old. Doesn't look like the preseason number 1 team at this point. They really look like a 9-3 team by the end of the year based on the schedule that they have. But we'll see
Yeah,
if they
tough
win this
schedule.
week. If they win this week at Austin, they're back in there. They're back as a national playoff or national championship contender. Right now, I think that they're kind of on that A tier, just outside of the S tier here for this year so far. Iowa State, look, that they got to keep going. I picked them to lose this past week against West Virginia. They got the job done and won against the spread. They're a team that just proves doubters wrong, and they've been doing that all season long. They're going to continue to do that until the end of the year, I think, when they've got Utah and Kansas State at the end of the season. And then who knows? Maybe they win those games too. You never know with this Cyclones team. I think that year 2 under this new coaching staff, they've got things rolling, and I really like what they're doing there. Clemson, like you said, they're a team on the rise. Ever since the Georgia loss, they've been getting better and better week after week. The offense is clicking. They kind of slowed. They kind of came out slow against Wake Forest in that first quarter, and then really got things going there in the middle 2 quarters, and kind of sat at the end of the game, kept people healthy and whatnot. But really like where Clemson's going. You're absolutely right. They are an ACC contender, especially with the way Miami seems to progressed in the past couple of weeks, playing a couple of close games there. But really like where Clemson's at right now. LSU, huge win against Ole Miss, goes to overtime. Didn't expect anything less in this football game because these are 2 really good teams between LSU and Ole Miss. It kind of felt like Ole Miss was the better team throughout the game, but you saw Garrett Nussmeier make plays late with his arm, make some plays and rolled out with his legs, avoided some pressure and whatnot. He just looks like one of the most gutsy quarterbacks in the SEC right now. Really like his game and what he's been able to do with those receivers. Got to get the run game involved, like you said, on the offensive side of the football. The defense, I think, has gotten marginally better week in and week out, and now they're playing pretty. They're playing effectively. It seemed like Harold Perkins finally kind of came back to life. They kind of revived him on coming off the edge there, and the defensive line is now swarming to the football. It's really fun to watch the progression of this Tigers team, and they're definitely a team to watch in the SEC moving forward.
Brian
Alabama.
Kelly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just yeah. So Alabama, real quick, is a team that I've got back here on my shelf somewhere. Like they are up on the shelf. Not getting them down for a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this Alabama team because they are a team that can play at the highest of highs and the lowest of lows this year. They seem very undisciplined as a team. They seem very poorly coached right now, I would say, for the talent that's on this team. It's really mind-boggling what they really haven't done this season so far, other than beat Georgia. That was a really impressive win, and it's really the only thing holding them into the top 10 right now. But yeah, Alabama definitely on the downslide. I would not be surprised if they don't make the college football playoffs. We didn't have them in our college football playoffs at the beginning of the year, anyways. But at this point, it seems like things are worse than we could have even imagined.
It just seems like the attitude around the program isn't very good right now. I mean, obviously the fan base is pretty negative right this second. Alabama has played 10 bad quarters in a row, and that I think is where the frustration lies. And look, I'm going to put Georgia right there in the same. Georgia has played bad in 60% of the quarters they've played this year too. So it's really tough to figure out what's going on with these football teams. Now, what's going on at Georgia and what's going on in Alabama, I think they're two different things. Don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. But I don't know, man. Alabama, it seems like they've taken the player-led thing a little too far. And it seems like the players are running the team rather than the coaches, in my opinion. And we'll see how that kind of comes to fruition throughout the season. LSU, I just wanted to say one more thing. Brian Kelly hired Blake Baker and has completely just given him the reins to the defense. I watched that game very closely, especially the last quarter and then the overtime there. Brian Kelly has literally no input at all on the defense. He doesn't say anything while the defense is on the field. He goes up to Blake Baker after the defensive series is over. They say 5 words to one another, and that's it. Brian Kelly, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. Brian Kelly is focused on the offense, helping a new play caller there on the offense. I saw it last night. Brian Kelly sitting there on the sideline. Offense goes out on the field. He's saying, "Run it, run it, run it, run it, run it." I can read his lips. And then what do they do? Well, run it. He has an input on the offense. Blake Baker's running this defense. I think that's the best possible scenario for this LSU team. Blake Baker may be a head coach one day, but right now, I think he's just a hell of a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
1 through 5. Oregon is number 1 for obvious reasons here. Look, and for anybody that feels like Texas should be number 1, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Texas. I'm wearing the Georgia shirt. Any Texas fan that sees this is going to say, "Oh, he's just a hater." Well, no, I'm trying to be objective here. Texas hasn't beat anybody yet, guys. I mean, I know that they're really good. I know that Texas is really good. I have 2 eyeballs. I can see that. I've watched years of football. Okay. I can see that Texas is good. They have not played an offense with a pulse yet. They haven't played an offense that's top 60 in total offense yet this season. Okay. So that is what it is. And that has led to the fact that Texas hasn't played in big games, as many big games as Oregon has. Oregon just beat Ohio State. That's obvious. We all just watched it. Fantastic football game, by the way. That we just watched a college football playoff game in October, essentially, is what we just did. But what's Texas's biggest win right now? Is it Michigan or is it Oklahoma? And I don't think anybody can honestly tell me because I don't know who would win between Michigan and Oklahoma, man. I really don't. So with that being said, Oregon clearly has better wins than Texas does at this point. Texas hasn't been in a dogfight yet, and that's kudos to Texas. They've played amazing football so far this season, done everything they're supposed to do, but they have not been in a dogfight yet, and it is coming. I don't know when it's going to be. Maybe it's, pun intended, when the dogs roll into town. I don't know, but right now, it's very clear to me that Oregon deserves to be number 1, at least for the time being. Now, Penn State at number 3. Do I really think Penn State is the 3rd best football team in America? No, not really. But how can you disprove that? Is kind of my point. We all have these preconceived notions in our head when the season starts of where a team should be. I'm trying to just let that go out one of my ears here, because I want to put the best teams where they deserve to be. And Penn State was in a dogfight this weekend against the Trojans. It seemed early in the week, we looked at the line, we thought Penn State would win that game easily. We talked about it on the Thursday betting show. We said, whoa, 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 hold up. This is going to be a good ball game. And lo and behold, it was. I don't think USC is as bad as what a lot of people think they are. And that's hard to say because they've been like this. They've been inconsistent. They've been good some weeks and really bad some weeks. I think you got the best version of USC this past weekend. And I think we saw the best version of Penn State. I think that's the best version of what we're going to get from Penn State. Maybe the defense can play a little better, but the offense, I mean, good Lord gave them lemons. They're making lemonade with it. Okay. They got a tight end lining up at center, going out for passes. They're doing any and everything they can to generate points on offense. And so far this season, it has worked. Penn State has scored more points this season and has looked a little bit better on offense and has been willing to try some new things. Did it fit well on Drew Aller last night? You know, not necessarily. He threw a bunch of interceptions, so that'll be something to clean up. But anyway, Penn State's a good football team. Are they great? I think that's still undecided. Miami at number 4. Miami hasn't been tested either. Now we're getting to a point in the season where Miami hasn't been tested, but they haven't lost a game. So what am I to do with them? I think they're pretty good. I think they got a chance to be really good, but we haven't seen like an amazing matchup for them, although we have seen them have to come back from the depths, have to come back from, a big deficit. And we've saw them scratch and claw against Virginia Tech, come back from a deficit in that football game. This team's got a lot of fight, and they have been somewhat battle tested, even if some of the teams they were tested against weren't, top 25 teams necessarily. I think Miami's pretty good. That's eye test. They don't have wins that just prove that without having to, go into this whole spill. But I think they're pretty good, and we're going to find out this last half of the season what Miami's really about. And Ohio State at number 5. I didn't have the heart to drop Ohio State any farther than this, to be honest with you. And it's something we didn't talk about in the reaction show last night, Mason. Jeremiah Smith was a big reason that Ohio State kind of stumbles at the end of that football game. I mean, he played an amazing game, but the offensive pass interference that was blatant, by the way, it wasn't a bogus call or anything like that. But when he goes out and he shoves the cornerback 7 yards backwards and then catches that pass and backs Ohio State up out of field goal range, that's on him. That wasn't on Will Howard, and I didn't agree with Will Howard what he did at the end of that football game. But my whole point in this is a freshman made a freshman mistake in that football game. It cost Ohio State the game. And that's how these types of games go. And that's why I say it was like a playoff game. I mean, it was margin of error was very thin in this football game. And Oregon won more moments than Ohio State did. And I think both teams are really, really good. I think both teams absolutely will be in the playoff at the end of the season. What do you think about the top 5? I'm trying to talk faster and get all this information out without taking too long, but, easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's picking up where you left off with Ohio State. We did see Jeremiah Smith get the penalty. It was a freshman mistake. That it was the first freshman mistake that I've seen him make all year. And that's just a credit to him. It came at the worst possible moment. He still had an incredible game. He's still probably the best wide receiver in college football for my money. And he's gonna be absolutely fun to watch as the games go on. I think that there's a good chance that Ohio State and Oregon play at least one more time, if not twice. I think that both of these teams are clearly the best in the Big Ten. I would be really surprised if they're not playing one another in the Big Ten championship game, and then potentially later on in the season. I mean, I would not be upset with the Ohio State Oregon national championship game with what we saw last night. I think that would be extremely fun to watch and an extremely fun storyline. Miami at 4. Miami's been one of those Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde teams. They were very good the first 4 games of the season. Past 2 games, they have struggled to put away some mediocre ACC opponents. Not sure what we're going to get this week. They've got another test with Louisville coming up, but I do know that's going to be a pretty fun game. Game is in Louisville, by the way, so A lot of pressure there on Cam Ward once again, but he's a guy who has been cool, calm, and collected under pressure so far this season. I don't expect that to change this year or this week. Penn State at number 3, like you said, that we don't think Penn State's the number 3 team in the country, but they are just plugging along and winning. We've said all season that with Penn State's schedule, it's going to be tough to keep them out of the college football playoff. No Michigan on the schedule, no Oregon on the schedule, if I'm not mistaken. No, they do get Ohio State, so that's going to be a fun matchup to watch. But I feel like Ohio State at this point is much better than Penn State. I think that's one that they're going to win. But really, you look at Penn State's schedule, and from the beginning of the year, we're looking at it and saying, yeah, it looks like an 11-1 season for them. They're probably going to be in the college football playoff. So get used to seeing them in the top 10, whether you think they deserve to be from a power rating or not. I'll say all of that and then caveat that to say that was a really impressive win against USC. A lot of models, we had talked about this last night, a lot of models were saying that Penn State would win by less than 1 point. And they didn't beat the spread, but they beat that at least. They won by 3. Could have been an upset, waiting to happen, but they got it done. They showed, some grit and got it done.
That line was a nasty little trick played on everybody by Vegas, is what that was.
Yeah.
That was a nasty little trick that Vegas pulled on everybody, because I know what everybody betted. It was Penn State. I know they did. I saw where the money was going, and that was a nasty little trick.
Yeah, and Penn State, they found a way to win. So I think having them in the top 5 is warranted. We'll see where they drop after they face Ohio State, and I think get exposed after that game. But we'll have to wait and see after that game gets played. Texas at number 2. I think you got it right here, Mark. Oregon at 1, Texas at 2. Oregon's got the better win over Ohio State. Texas does not have a top 10 win at this point in the season. I think Texas is really, really good. I think that they are probably the best team in the country right now as far as what they've put on film from a power rating perspective. But they got to beat Georgia this week. If they beat Georgia this week, I think that Texas goes to number 1, just based on what we've seen.
Oh, yeah.
How they've performed in games that they should win, and how they've performed against I think as an underdog against Georgia this week, if I'm not mistaken. So anyways, Texas could be back at number 1 after this week. I would not be surprised in the least. But Oregon gets the flowers this week. Huge win against Ohio State. I think that Dan Lanning, this was the biggest win for him so far this year, so far in his career, I should say. And Oregon, I mean, they had to play a really good game, and they did. Everything was really clicking for them for the most part. And also they did this without Jordan Birch, really their best defensive lineman. He's not there for this game, and they were still able to get pressure on Will Howard. I thought it was a really complete performance by Oregon, and one that they'll have to replicate moving forward if they're going to win the Big Ten.